Hello, good evening and welcome ladies and gentlemen to another round of absolutely entertaining and enthralling racing action in the middle of the pack Racing League GTE League for 2026 as brought to you on the Premier Sim Racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. The story of our season continues, but its chapters are coming towards a close as we've made our way today to round number 7-8 and we are here at the SIlverstone Grand Prix Circuit, the home of British motor racing, for our final sprint race round of the season. Another 45 minutes to wait, and what a circuit for our drivers to go racing at today. Of course, known as the home of British motor racing, arguably you could say that the SIlverstone Grand Prix Circuit is also the home of downforce-based racing. At its core is a 3.66 mile layout circuit whereby with 18 corners, the vast majority of them are sweepers, and it means that for our drivers they need to carry every mile an hour they can, going through those bends and onto its long straights, and in doing so every mile per hour will matter in the run towards the next braking zone, with its wide open nature of course owing to the fact that this circuit originated from the site of what was a Royal Air Force airfield, RAF Silverstone, during the Second World War. Much like many a British circuit, if it was not built on a country estate, is a circuit with plenty of width and therefore plenty of overtaking opportunities abound from the first corner all the way through to the very last one. For our drivers today then, it's going to be the game of trying to break away when you can, but also mitigate the dirty of your rivals, and in doing so you may just be able to come out on top, but those who fall behind, they may not be able to play catch up. But where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this post-round broadcast from Circuit Side as you tune in tonight, the way place you can catch all the racing action as if it were live. That's of course on youtube.com and search for Walsh Productions or PWP. In the content booth you have myself, Paul Walsh, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action as it unfolds to this season. And whilst the racing for this round occurred on Wednesday the 20th of May 2026, we're bringing it to you as if it were live today, this Saturday the 30th of May. And as always, that means here in the content booth we do not know what happens, whether it be in the practice session that's gradually coming to a close, the upcoming qualifying session, or most importantly the race, and therefore it's as close as possible to the raw live viewing experience you guys and girls tune in at home. Speaking of which, in terms of our schedule for today, times in Eastern Daylight Time, EDT, or Universal Coordinate Time, -4, UTC -4, as we can see in approximately around about 8 minutes time, we make it our way into our final qualifying session of the season, 10 minutes in duration, or drives out on the circuit looking to go for pole position, after which we'll make our way to the grid at 8:20 this evening for our final sprint race, our final 45-minute race, and come the end of it, we'll set ourselves up for our season finale at the circuit, the Spa-Francorchamps, and we'll know who our championship favourites are, and who the big contenders are across both our Pro and Pram classes, both overall and also in the Euro Cup. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring you up to speed with the story after round number 6 and see exactly how the standings stand after 6 incredible rounds of racing action. And we begin then by recapping our calendar, and we can see that last time out in round number 6 on the 6th of May, we were in Italy at the Imola circuit, or the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo E. Dino Ferrari. But the home of the man behind Ferrari, what exactly did we get to see play out there? Well, we got to see a whole host of drivers make the way to the Imola circuit, but there was one in particular who led the way, and that was none other than Ryan Otis, who became the Pro class's first repeat winner, and the first repeat overall winner as well, making up for the disappointment of the circuit to Barcelona Catalunya, where he was beaten to the lead into the opening quarter by James Logsdon, and whilst he absolutely hurried and harried him all the way through, he was never quite able to find a way back past. However, Ryan Otis, it really was a dominant day in the office, taking that pole position and leaving everybody else behind, and then running away with it all the way to the checkered flag. But there was plenty of excitement behind him in qualifying, with second through to fifth separated by only 0.14 of a second in a qualifying session for second that was headed by Eric Lagai, and we saw the race for the rest of the positions come down to some great side-by-side fights and who made the least mistakes at Imola. Speaking of which, Eric Lagai, we pulled off that brilliant second place in qualifying, only to make an early mistake in the race, but he almost pulled off a monster recovery drive after his lap 6 spin to go all the way back into the top 5, only to end up losing out to a black flag drive-through penalty due to instant points picked up right at the end of the race, and it was only with 2 laps to go. But indeed, there were mistakes so many. James Logsdon also experienced a major mistake of his own. He lost some very critical points, but not quite as many mistakes for Matthew Morhart or Shajee Zuhair, with the two of them rounding off the overall podium with the Pro podium. Meanwhile, what we got to see in the Pram class was a battle between Tom Bryce and Glenn Bratton. Now, on paper, based on qualifying, you would have thought the day was going to go the way purely of Bryce in taking his third class win of the season and beating Bratton to pole by half a second. But in the race, it was Bratton who proved to be the more consistent driver when it came to avoiding minor mistakes, albeit a major mistake early on the race for Bryce saw him end up falling all the way to the back of the field, a long way away, but he gradually tried to chomp away at the lead that Bratton had been able to establish, and well, Glenn Bratton here made a mistake of his his own, one too many, and he picked up a drive-through penalty for it for instant points. And if it had not been for that, it would have been very close between the two of them right towards the very end of the race at the checkered flag. So therefore, whilst the headline said that Tom Bryce did take victory ahead of Glenn Bratton in Pro-Am by 49 seconds, the reality was it would have been extremely close if not for the drive-through penalty that Glenn Bratton picked up. But still, that's the way it went last time out. And it was an absolutely brilliant race at Imola, and we can expect plenty more here today, because it's time for round number 7, of course, and we're here at the SIlverstone Grand Prix Circuit in the UK. Next time out, our season finale, our second of our feature race rounds, of course, it'll be at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, and that'll be on the 3rd of June on Drivers Go Racing, and we'll be bringing you the race in action as if it were live, I do believe, on none other than what will be Saturday the 16th of June. In fact, no, Saturday the 13th of June. Let's get that correct there. I'll get my dates mixed up, but we'll just reconfirm. It's Saturday the 13th of June that we will be bringing the curtain down. And what's been an absolutely brilliant season, a very challenging season in getting used to our GTE machines. But in terms of how the standings stand after 6 rounds of racing action, I should say, well, here we can see that right now in the overall Drivers' Championship, you look to your left and you can see that James Logsdon leads by 18 points ahead of Shajee Zuhair. But for Logsdon, it was not a day to be remembered at Imola. It's definitely a day you would put behind him. Took 5th place in qualifying. He was the one who lost out in the 1400s battle between 2nd and 5th. It was around a misfortune for him, and qualifying really was just an indicator of what was to come. Was in the race, he did gradually move up to 3rd place in the opening 4 laps and proceeded to pit early on lap 11 to go for the undercut strategy to get him out of the traffic. However, after his pit stop, a major error going for Aquaman on lap number 14, an instant on lap 15, and some off-tracks all added up to give him a black flag drive-through penalty, which demoted him all the way down to 6th place overall, and he managed to steal the 5th place back off of Eric Lagai right at the end with Lagai's own drive-through penalty. But otherwise for Logsdon, it was a thrown-away opportunity to try and give himself a very comfortable lead going into the final 2 rounds. For Shajee Zuhair, meanwhile, he didn't quite have the pace to match Matthew Morhart for 2nd place, but he drove a very solid race in his BMW M8 to make sure that he was the final driver on the podium overall, and in the end, his consistency really shone through. Ryan Otis, however, the man who's continued to try and close the gap to Logsdon, was a 2nd win of the season. Now, 202 points, he's leapt up to 3rd ahead of Taylor Bookout, and we do see that top 5 completed by Matthew Morhart, who's very quickly approaching the top 3 himself, albeit now 2 points ahead of Chad Henson. Julian Jones, Matt Best, Eric Lagai, and Jermaine Warren complete your top 10. And, well, we see Lagai and Warren both on 149 points. It's looking as though currently at least Jermaine Warren's going to have an opportunity to get ahead of Lagai today. Given Lagai's not going to be on the grid as we understand it, but Jermaine Warren will be at Silverstone. And we do see Gabriel Ferreira there in 11th place ahead of Blake Phillips, with Jason Landry, Edwin Offrit and David Addy completing the pros. But without the Pro-Am Drivers' Championship overall, well, we can see after 6 rounds of racing, Tom Bryce leads now by an advantage of 9 points ahead Glenn Bratton. He's just gradually opened that gap, but an intriguing twist. We've only got Glenn Bratton here today out of our Pro-Am drivers, so it's an open door opportunity for Glenn to be able to pick up some major points going into the season finale, and he will make himself the favourite to Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, and Bryce will have to try and find a way to fight back. Donald Cepic sits in 3rd. We haven't seen him for the last couple of rounds, but we hope to see him back in the near future, with Mark Senegal, Roger Ganesh, Carl Peterson and Bill Mendocosta completing your Pro-Am standings. But as to the Euro Cup standings after 2 rounds, reminding you of course the fact the Euro Cup is based on the points scored by drivers with no drop scores applying, unlike the overall Drivers' Championships where they have 1 drop score, but here we see in the Euro Cup no drop scores, and it's only the points taken from rounds 5, 6, 7 and 8, which are the 4 rounds that make up the Euro Cup, and of course rounds 1 through to 4 we had earlier in the season made up the US Cup. And Ryan Otis right now, your leader in the left hand side there for the Pro category, and we're leader 11 points, so he makes it his 3rd win of the season today. Then surely James Logsdon right now is going to need a major landslide result against Otis at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps if he wants to try and steal back the Euro Cup crown. Meanwhile, Matthew Morhart only a further point behind. The priority right now could definitely be for Logsdon to make sure he's secure in 2nd place, and you have a good chance to do so today with Morhart not having made the trip to the UK. And we do see a further point behind there, Shajee Zuhair, who has a great chance not just to move into 3rd, but potentially still 2nd, given the fact he's proven to be the quicker of the 2 drivers between himself and Logsdon currently in this practice session from what I'm hearing. Meanwhile, we do see there in 5th place Taylor Bookout on 78 points, well clear of Julian Jones and Jermaine Warren, and Eric Lagai and Matt Best complete the Pro standings in the Euro Cup. Meanwhile, as for your Pro-Am category, here we can see that Tom Bryce now leading by 3 points to Glenn Bratton. But as we mentioned only moments ago, out of the 2 Pro-Am drivers, only Glenn Bratton has made the trip to the UK today. So this is a great opportunity for Glenn to be able to essentially take the lead and try to open up a big enough gap that Bryce will not be able to close it back down in the season finale, pursuing both of them on the grid in Belgium. But that's how things stand in the Euro Cup after 4 rounds. But let's tell you a little bit about our host circuit for today, because of course we are racing at the Grand Prix layout of the Silverstone circuit, located near near the village of Silverstone. It's got 3 villages that sit around it, but Silverstone is the closest one. One of the other ones being Towcester. And as the drivers head out onto the Northamptonshire County Circuit in England and the United Kingdom, well, a huge thank you to iRacing.com, not just for their brilliant simulator, but the absolutely fantastic track maps contained within it. And here we can see the Grand Prix Circuit in its full splendour, one that is definitely a household name, not just in the United Kingdom, but primarily on the European continent, but even though I do believe it extends to other continents and around the world, whether it be in the US of A or Turkey on the Asian continent. And it's easy to understand why, because our drivers roar the way down the start-finish straight and up towards Abbey Bend. Not quite the Abbey corner of many a year ago. This layout being conceived as of 2010 into 2011 for the purposes of safety compared to the previous Silverstone Grand Prix layout, where the speeds have been brought down and the infield has definitely been utilised more, whereas the drivers roar the way through Abbey, we practically flat out in qualifying and perhaps a small lift and coast and heavy fuel in the race, and they'll make their way through Farm Curve and in towards the braking zone of Village. The 90-degree right handle then give away to the loop hairpin, and our drivers will need to be very patient on the throttle as they come through there, while they go through Aintree and onto the first of the long stretches. That is the Wellington Straight, named after the Vickers Wellington bombers of the Second World War, which used to take off on the runways here at RAF Silverstone. As our drivers roar the way down the straight, plenty of overtaking opportunities into Brooklands and Luffield, the infamous left into right sweeping segment, whereby you can go outside to inside or inside to outside when you want to go for an overtake. However, you definitely want to get it right on the exit out of Luffield, because the bump in the road will send the car wide, but those who avoid the understeer and avoid complicated things with some oversteer, they'll then power the way down the National Straight, which begins with the curve of Woodcut, and make their way up towards Cops Bend. The infamous scene, of course, the Hamilton-Verstappen incident only a few years ago. Well, for our drivers go too wide through there will prove challenging, but also it's one of the hardest corners of the circuit to master when you're by yourself, because you never quite know how much speed you need to take into Cops Bend. But get it right, our drivers will roar the way out to Maggots into Beckett's, the infamous sweeping S's section, of which turns 2 up through to 7 are modelled on for the Circuit of the Americas in the US state of Texas. And as the drivers make their way through turns 10, 11, 12 and 13, they'll find that the average apex speed descends before they blast their way out of through Chapel and make their way onto the Hanger Straight. Downhill and then uphill they go into a Stowe Bend, the seat of the infamous Nigel Mansell move, the dummy move made all the way back in the 1980s, if my memory serves me correctly, or the early 1990s. And then we do see our drivers make their way through Stowe Bend and down the hill through Vale into the chicane, the turn 16 and 17. We'll go through Club Bend's complete lap and do it all over again. Now, a quick reminder of the rules before we go racing. Setup-wise, drivers running a fixed setup as provided by the Middle of the Pack Racing League Administration, and fuel loads have been restricted to 50%. Qualified, it's an open qualifying format, so all drivers will be out of the circuit together within the 10 minutes, and, well, they'll have the opportunity to deliver their laps, plus a bit of overtime should they need it. Sprint race-wise, the race shall start via rolling start, as is the expectation of any GTE racing around the world, when the class was in operation between 1999 and 2023, and each driver shall have one fast pair available should they need to use it, and a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 10 or more instant points. Very strict on the instant points here at the Middle of the Pack Racing League. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we make our way back to circuit side, because it is time to go into qualifying, and let's see who exactly is going to put it on pole position. Because as we do see there, Ryan Otis make his way out. As he does so, very quickly roaring his way out the pit lane. And, well, the Porsche 911 RSR driver absolutely lightning quick when it comes to race pace, and he's lightning quick in terms of just getting out there onto the circuit right now. And how important is qualifying going to be here? Well, we have a grid of 6 drivers today. Not the biggest grid, but to be fair, as we've always said, and we saw it at Imola, we've seen it in every round this season. Just because we don't have the quantity of drivers does not deprive us of the quality of the racing action. And the importance of qualifying, well, is quite significant, because overtaking is highly possible here, but overtaking battles normally do run for several corners, depending on the section of the circuit you begin the overtaking attempt. So therefore, if you can put yourself on pole and get a good break at the start and get a gap of about 2 to 3 seconds, you could prove to be very safe. However, given the nature of the circuit and the fact you really do need to run it from quarter apex to quarter apex and from curb to curb, this is one of those circuits where if you start to be a little bit inconsistent or start making mistakes, you're going to feel a lot of pain. It's not just the one corner you make the mistake in where you lose the time, you'll also lose the time at plenty of other corners later on in the lap or those that follow in the sequence. And it really is the long straights here at the Silverstone circuit of the Wellington Straight plus the Hanger Straight which create the dividing lines. Otherwise, you could say in a way, if you also include the start-finish straight or the Hamilton Straight as it's been relabeled to, in honour of the 7-time World Formula 1 champion, one day chasing his 8th crown to see if he can break Michael Schumacher's record, of course, although whether that's going to happen or not before he retires, there's always question marks about that as he races for Ferrari currently. Well, the key point being the fact those those 3 straights really divide the Silverstone circuit up into 3 key parts. And intriguingly, not quite how the sectors are aligned at the circuit, although they come quite close, but it is a bit of an interesting trivia, the fact you really can break this circuit down into 3 key components and the straights do separate it up. But as Glenn Bratton weaves from side to side, trying to get a bit of tyre temperature in his BMW M8, what can we expect of the cars? Well, the good news is, from this point onwards, ladies and gentlemen, as we do see the family machine make its way through, that is the wonderful Ford EcoBoosting machine, and that is Julian Jones making his way onwards. And from this point onwards, we do have the 1 Ford, the 3 BMWs, the Jermaine Warren, Shajee Zuhair, and Glenn Bratton, and also the 2 Porsche 911 RSRs of James Logsdon and Ryan Otis. But understand, we don't have the Ferrari 488 Evos out there, nor do we have the other machinery in the GT category that briefly escapes my brain, and it comes back as the Corvette C8R. And well, Ryan Otis onto his first flying lap. And this is one of those circuits where it's going to feel very even between all the machines, because the Porsche, of course, the king of low-speed corners and corner exit traction, and also very fast to the straight if you take all the downforce off the car. But this is a circuit where, of course, downforce is king. We are running the fixed setup, so therefore it means our drivers cannot tweak the car beyond the brake bias, and therefore it does mean all machinery is relatively equal based on the balance of performance. So we can expect the Porsche to be quick through the lower speed corners. What about the BMWs? Well, the BMW is more known as straight line speed king, particularly when you are running a bit of downforce on the car, so expect the BMWs to be lightning quick as they power their way and down towards each and every heavy braking zone, such as the run down the Wellington Straight, as shown by Jermaine Warren here. They're going into Brooklands and Luffield. And as for the Ford GT, well, this could be, in theory, the circuit where the Ford GT gets the very most out of it, because it is arguably the car that's all about the downforce on it, and it absolutely loves sweeping bends. Now, corners such as the loop here at turn number 4, it doesn't quite enjoy low-speed corners. The traction on the Ford GT isn't quite as strong as the Porsche, and indeed, it lights up its tyres quite aggressively. However, beyond that, you've got a lot of sweeping bends. You've also got some rather gradual and elegant direction changes thrown into the mix, and that's something the Ford GT loves. Like Road Atlanta early on the season, take a circuit where the car's able to carry a lot of speed, and the Ford can absolutely maximise its downforce, no doubt about it. But great to see Julian Jones out there in the machine. That has become a little bit of a meme in the middle of the pack racing league community. Every time you see it, everyone wants to shout EcoBoost. We even had a broadcast that was hijacked by the cult of EcoBoost, but right now we're doing our best to make sure the cult don't take over here. But joking aside, first lap's coming on the board. Ryan Otis sets the benchmark at a 56.470, but James Logsdon only a 10th behind in the Porsches. Now, what about others out there? Glenn Bratton, what could he do in his BMW M8? The bulky Beamer as he heads towards the timeline. And our sole pro driver here today, well, the best part 2.5 seconds off of 58.914, but not a bad start. Jermaine Warren heads towards the line. Can he put himself up there? No, on a 59.489. So it looks like our BMW driver struggling a little bit at the moment in qualifying. Shajee Zuhair did not get a valid lap on the board for his first flying lap, and well, that could be a sign of things to come, because this is one of the longer laps on our calendar as well. Each lap just under 2 minutes in the prime. What that does mean is over 10 minutes you have very little time available in theory, because you do the quick mathematics, out lap, subtracted off, say that's 2.5 minutes. You've only got 4 laps here if you do all of them together. And speaking of getting laps together, we're going to jump on board here with Julian Jones. He gets his first lap on the board, and let's go for a tour of the circuit at high speed in the Ford EcoBoost machine. He's making his way in towards turn 1 as he does so, throwing the car through the corner there, and now make his way from Abbey in towards 5, completely flat out before he brings it over to the left-hand side and onto the brakes here for turn number 3. Went all the way down the gearbox to first gear, and as he clears Village and now into loop, into the hairpin here, staying in first, he makes his way through, and just very patient, straight in the steering wheel, and now full throttle as he heads through Aintree and on to the Wellington Straight. The first sequence of corners complete. Now he's got a bit of breathing room, but he has to look to his right hand side for his brake marker, going in towards Brooklands. At this point, up into 5th gear. Will he get to 6th? No, he doesn't. He stays in 5th, braking at the 100 metre board, trail braking down, but it's such a late apex here, and you want to hit it as late as possible before you make your way in towards Luffield. And at this point, well, he's going to take the V-shape approach, which is the conventional approach, which is you let the car roll slightly out and get it turned in, and that way you can straighten the steering wheel up nice and early, avoid the bump in the road, and go flat out now through Woodcote Bend, cutting as close as possible to the inside wall as you dare on the National Straight, looking to his left-hand side now for his brake marker, and that will be the 50 metre board. But he brakes about 75 metres rather than on the board there, which makes sense given the speed of these machines and the lack of ABS. And now going in towards Maggots into Beckett. Here it'll be left, right, left as he comes on in. A little bit early on the turn now to straighten the car back out, but now he comes through turns 10, 11. Now onto the brakes, dropping down 2 gears to 3rd gear through 12 in towards Beckett. And now as he blasts out in 2nd gear, does the car line up? It does. Lovely line there for Julian Jones. and making his way all the way up towards Stowe Bend, and here down the hanger straight he goes. You can see it's a small depression and uphill into the braking zone. At this point you want to brake as late as possible and carry all the speed if you can. And where he goes with brake at the 50 board, then down to third gear, a little bit of understeer creeps, and he could have broken perhaps 5 metres earlier and it would have been perfect, but still that is close to perfection as it comes. And now into the Vale chicane, down to first gear as he makes his way left into right. You want to keep it nice over to the left there for the first part, open up the second part. Perfect line there for Julian Jones. Now through Club Bend, flat out, he's got to commit to it, and he does so in a lovely lap there for Julian Jones. It's a 57.803, and he's got 2 more laps left that you can put together. Well, that puts him in full place there. 1.3 seconds off the overall pole time, set by Ryan Otis, but Otis and Logsdon still locking horns, a 10th apart at the moment. And Shajee Zuhair, meanwhile, well, he was looking very strong in practice, but right now, your BMW driver, who's running a bit of a different livery today, it must be said, although lovely livery on the car, the Arrival Drive Privateer. He always has a habit of wearing some of the better liveries on the grid, the Sri Lankan driver, and as he makes his way onwards, well, of course, going from the more Sri Lankan colour-themed livery that we've previously seen, so now a bit of a different livery out there, but to be fair, whatever he's wearing, I can tell you one thing, it's one of the most stylish cars out there, that BMW M8, in his very capable hands. But as he comes on down the hill, through the Vale, is he backing off here, coming in towards the chicane? Looks like he might be getting himself set up for a little bit of a lap, although I say that, in fact, I take a look back at his sector times, I think he might be on for a personal best here, but the camera angle makes the car look a lot slower than it is. Well, here he goes towards the time line. What's it going to be as he crosses it? And the answer is going to be not an improve, so he was backing off there. We were right, and now he's going to give it one last go, because that last lap until he made a mistake coming out of Stowe Bend, he was on for a personal best. But Ryan Otis has raised the benchmark as he goes on to his final lap to a 56.039, and well, that is now half a second quicker than Logsdon. Meanwhile, Glenn Bratton does improve, and while Sol Pram Drive doing a great effort there at 58.699. So the time is definitely being found. Can he find a bit more? Can he get himself ahead of Jermaine Warren before all is said and done, or at least get himself a bit closer? He's going to give it his best, no doubt about it. As he comes on around there, the V8 twin turbo machine of the BMW absolutely screaming its lungs out, albeit not quite screaming as loud as the Porsches will, the naturally aspirated 6-cylinder engine. And well, we also do have the EcoBoost machine of Julian Jones there, and I'm trying to remember the literage of that car, although it does escape me at this time. I'm sure somebody will be able to tell me one day. But as we do see Shajee Zuhair headed onwards, right now a minute left to go here in time, definitely in a premium, and I believe Julian Jones, as he comes towards the time line, he has improved. Yes, he has, a 57.212. That now holds him firmly fourth, but it only puts him 2 tenths or so off of Shajee Zuhair's time on that second row, and that's going to be 6 tenths between him and Jermaine Warren. So it is the 2 Porsches ahead of a BMW and a Ford, and then it's the other 2 BMWs that complete the starting order if it stands. We'll have to wait and see what drivers can do, as meanwhile Ryan Otis, well, he's currently on for an even quicker lap. He's got purple in sectors 1, 2 and 3. Can he make it a complete quartet of purple sectors? And in so, well, how far is this going to go? As in fact, he's not had the best of the final sector. The car sliding a little bit loose there coming out to the Vale. So could this be a bit of a compromise into lap? And the answer is no. It is 3 attempts he's found. It's now 55.709. A very impressive lap there for Ryan Otis. And what about James Logsdon? When he comes to the line, he does not improve. 56.634. What about Shajee Zuhair? Can he get himself onto the front row? He does. Shajee Zuhair, a 56.360. And brilliant that there from Zuhair. It's taken him some time to get it done, but like a jack in the box, he's had to wind himself up, and suddenly he's leapt out and said hello to Logsdon on that front row, and has demoted him away from it. Glenn Bratton, meanwhile, comes through the final corner. He's had a very good final sector, but does it make up for the fact he's had a poor opening sector? It does, a 58.200. Now in 4 attempts is Jermaine Warren, who improves to a 57.092, and Julian Jones is now on the back foot, as everyone has completed their qualifying session, minus him. Now what can the Ford GT driver do here to complete his day? Can he find a way? Oh no, he doesn't get it right. Going into Stowe, and around it goes there. A bit too greedy, coming down the gearbox, and as a result, he tried to carry all the speed, rolled into the barrier, and well, for Julian Jones, that is his qualifying session complete. So that is qualifying, ladies and gentlemen, and it is pole position to this man. Ryan Otis looking to go for 3 wins this season today. Well, he started off the right way, 6.5 tenths quicker than Shajee Zuhair, but for the second place spot, Zuhair 2 tenths quicker than James Logsdon, with Jermaine Warren a further half a second behind, but only a tenth, if that, from Julian Jones. So I think we've got some interesting racing coming up, and I think we're going to have partnerships out there where they're going to be battling, so long as they keep it clean and together. I can't see why this is not going to be a highly entertaining race, as we now do make our way to the grid very shortly. And that's the thing about the Silverstone circuit. When you are very similar in pace to another driver, you normally find that unless an incident separates you or somebody makes a major mistake, the two of you will be locked together for the majority of the racing. But that's what brings so many series to this circuit, including, of course, the FIA World Endurance Championship from 2012 through to 2019, back when the GTE class was in its prime, many would say. So GTs are no strangers to Silverstone, and that's why we've got them racing around here today. And really, Arcanda has focused as much as possible on circuits where GTE class has raced, or if not, there'll be a very high likelihood of the cars race around it. I think the only circuit where the GT machines have not raced around it has been the circuit of Barcelona, Catalonia. Still, we'll put that aside as we now make our way to the grid, and as we do, how exactly do they line up? Well, let's regale that for you. And as we can see, for round 7 of 8 in the middle of the pack Racing League GTE League for 2026, brought to you on iRacing, it is as follows. Ryan Otis lines up on pole position for our penultimate round here at the Silverstone Grand Prix Circuit at 55.709. Well done to Ryan, a very impressive qualifying that for pole position, no doubt about it, although it took him a bit of time to get into the 55s, but he did find them in the end. Joining him on the front row, with a season best qualifying performance, is Shajee Zuhair, the privateer. 6.5 tenths off of the American, but the Schlank can drive in the end, able to squeeze ahead by only 6 thousandths. Head of James Logsdon for Team Bearpope, who will start on that second row. The American driver had the company of his fellow countryman there, of Jermaine Warren, from middle of the pack racing, and then we will see Julian Jones, the privateer, and his fellow privateer, Glenn Bratton, complete our 6-car starting lineup. And Glenn Bratton, of course, your sole driver today in the prime category, but we look forward to seeing how he'll get on. Again, the fact that, of course, he'll want to try and beat some of the pros if he can, because you score points first and foremost based on your overall finishing position, and then if you're a pro-am driver, you get bonus points for the podium, 3 for first, 2 for second, and 1 for third. So for Glenn Bratton, he'll ideally want to see if he can get himself into that overall top 5, particularly if one of the pro drivers does make a considerable mistake or ends up with a penalty of some description, because if he can do so, it's just going to help him out that little bit more. But the field is almost set and ready to go. As we do await this formation lap to get underway, well, for Ryan Otis, as he sits there on the right-hand side, because understandably he will be starting on the inside into turn 1. That's normally how formation lap orders go when they're double file rolling starts, which is the pole sitter for most circuits. It doesn't apply at every circuit, but for most circuits, the pole sitter starts on the inside into the opening corner. The thought process is that they have the leading line into the corner, and they have the right to defend. Now, I do believe there are some circuits out there, and I'm sure somebody will be able to correct me if I'm wrong on this one. I believe Charlotte Roval for rolling starts. Well, I do believe it's the pole sitter who starts on the outside there, and that's because of how tight the line is on the inside into turn 1. So the leader has the right, essentially, to the best line into the opening corner. That's probably the better way to think of it. The leader should always have the best line into the corner, or the best line to be able to defend into the corner. So here it's the inside in towards Abbey. But either way, as we do see our pace car pulling away, well, it's over to Ryan Otis now to get us away for green flag racing. It's only a very short formation up here today, only the best part of approximately what is 0.7 miles. As he comes through the final corner, he'll get us away for round 7. And it's lights and away we go for our penultimate time this season as the field roars its way down towards turn number 1. And as it does so, while drives roar onwards, and as they come through, well, James Logsdon, Shajee Zuhair there, both get a good start. Meanwhile, Julian Jones had a bit of a slow run off the line. And side by side here with Glenn Bratton as they come down to the braking zone for the first time. But as they do, Jones taking the place back off of Bratton, who got caught out. And as they make the way in towards turn number 4 now, things settle down immediately, although Julian Jones definitely needs to get things switched on. I think he's been caught napping a little bit here. He's just not had a great start. But Ryan Otis, meanwhile, after running away in qualifying, well, right now he's not been allowed to run away as James Logsdon jumping Shajee Zuhair through the opening corner, and Logsdon right now trying to prove a point, which is, yes, you may have become the class's first repeat winner and the first repeat winner overall, but I'm not going to let you have it a third time this season. Well, I think Ryan Otis right now, if he can get those tyres warmed up and get himself calmed down, he might just be able to start opening up a gap, but we will see as our top 3 definitely start to pull away a little bit. And Jermaine Warren, meanwhile, in the MOP Racing BMW, is really at the head of the second pack, trying to get rid of Julian Jones and Glenn Bratton if he can. But it'll be easier said than done to drop them, given how powerful And the tow will be off of these cars. And these GT machines, of course, compared to your modern-day GT3s, have a lot more downforce on them, a lot more air on the package, and therefore it does mean that going through sweeping bends, when you're in the dirty of another car, you feel that dirtier considerably, but the reverse is true. When you go onto our long straights, which we're about to see them barrel their way down the hanger straight, well, this is where you'll pick up even more time, and that's why Otis is weaving a little bit on the exit chapel to make sure that he breaks the toe slightly, head up towards Star, and it just keeps it safe. But look behind, and there you can see the menacing grimace of the BMW of Shajee Zuhair, and well, I think right now he's trying to eye up a move here on Logsdon immediately, and we know that these two was only separated by 6 thousandths in the end in qualified, so therefore the theory is they should be absolutely even on pace as they come through at the end of the first lap, and now make their way onto lap number 2, and the Marmite machine, love it or hate it, it's going on the attack. So after one lap, it's Ryan Otis who leads, followed by James Logsdon and Shajee Zuhair. That's your top 3 all-pro. Then the female pros continues with Jermaine Warren in 4th, ahead of Julian Jones, and your Sol Graham of Glen Bratton's currently in 6th, but staying with Jones and Warren for this time. But coming on to lap number 2. And tyres now definitely getting up to temperature here, and the drivers will be settling in just a little bit more. As meanwhile, Shajee Zuhair's found his way past Logsdon. I think Logsdon went a bit deep there into turn number 3, and Zuhair goes around the outside through the loop, and then he throws Logsdon for a loop to take that second place. But this will buy Otis a bit of time and space, and now is the fight for second definitely going to become the priority. We'll soon find out. We will get a replay of that move made very shortly, and we will get a replay of some of the big moments from the race start as well as the drivers make way from Brooklands into Luffield. But Logsdon immediately go back on the attack here, and the team Bearpoke driver, well, he may have lost out when it came to that position, and he may have lost out in qualified, but he's not going to miss out and enjoy this battle as they come through Woodcote Bend, and we can see there's a hair keeping nice and close to the wall. But that Porsche at the draft right now, well, looking around the outside here, trying to use all the road at Cops Bend. Meanwhile, Zuhair a little bit hesitant to use all the road, and on a tighter line, he's going to go wide. That's not going to give him a slowdown, but it will give him an instant point for an off track. And one of the things we did perhaps talk about earlier on, yes, we have the 10 instant point limit, but those instant points will be accrued very quickly for those who are not respectful of the track limits. Here at Silverstone, you are required to keep 2 wheels in the white lines at all times at this circuit, barring I think 1 or 2 corners, although don't quote me on that. But what it does mean is, as much as you want to use every inch of the track you can, plus also all the curbs, do so, and you can very quickly build up a lot of instant points. Well, if you pick up 1 per lap, you'll be picking up a drive-through penalty before this race is said and done, as they come out of Stowe Bend. But right now, James Logsdon, you can see they're a lot more consistent compared to Zuhair. He just looks a bit smoother at the moment, the way he's driving his Porsche compared to the BMW front, as Zuhair goes a bit deep there through the Vale chicane. And well, the thing is, you want to keep it very tight to the exit of the first part of the chicane, because otherwise you compromise your line going into turn 17. But Zuhair, they're just about getting it done. The only problem is the more he leans on that left-hand side, that left front tyre in particular through the chicane early on, he's really going to hurt that tyre later on in the race. Now, understandably, for these GT machines, their tyre compound will last the best part of 3 hours of racing if it's well managed, so therefore over 45 minutes of racing, that tyre is not going to be absolutely worn down to the point of need replacement. Not they should want to replace the tyre, of course, given the fact that if they do, they put fuel in first and then the tyres are changed. It's not done simultaneously, unlike the modern day GT3 regulations, and therefore you lose way too much time. But Zuhair may find towards the end of this race that Sonny going through those right hand corners, that front left tyre is just not offering as much grip as it used to, and perhaps he'll lose a tenth or two, and that could give Logsdon an opportunity. That is, of course, if he continues to really lead into that tyre. And again, we'll have to wait and see whether his lines do calm down a little bit. Meanwhile, Jermaine Warren still trying to gap Julian Jones, gap almost up to a second, and Glen Bratton gradually being dropped. But to be fair, little pressure on him as the prime leader right now in a class of his own. Well, I think he would love to be with the leaders if he can. He'd love to take a pro scalp if possible. But as we look from the back of the field to the very front, well, right now, Ryan Otis makes his way into Beckett's for the 3rd time of asking. And you see that gap now holding around 1.2 seconds. And I wonder if Ryan is perhaps just pacing himself here. Now, of course, there's a couple of ways you can cut a race, depending on how confident you feel as the leader. One is essentially just to go all in and try and gap your rivals as much as possible, but understandably, that leaves you with less strategic options, and particularly if the cars behind you are able to stay within a distance of you, such as 1.1 to 1.2 seconds as we're seeing here from Shajee Zuhair and James Logsdon, well, suddenly they may be able to do some more fuel saving, whilst you cannot as the leader, because you do not have the draft of anybody in front, and therefore the only thing you can do is what is abbreviated to LICO in the modern day and era, but I'll refer to it as lift and coast for those of the older nomenclature. Well, the idea is you just simply lift off the throttle about 50 metres before your typical braking zone into a corner, and therefore you coast your way into the corner. It also means you have to apply less braking for each, you're carrying slightly less speed than before, but that's how you save fuel and a little bit of tyre life. understandably, that's all you can do as the leader. So, one fault therefore is for Ryan Otis, if he can manage that gap to the region around 1.2 to 2 seconds, he can then afford to just do more lifting and coasting and keep the gap at the same distance, and he gives himself a strategic equality to his rivals, whereby he'll have done a lot of fuel saving on his own. He shouldn't have to spend much more time pitting compared to them who have had more options to fuel save, shall we say. But the final sector of that previous lap, Otis opened up half a second through the final 3 quarters. So that's what he's finding the lap time it is. And in fact, I can tell you the fact, looking back at the sector times on that previous lap, it was through the chicane itself, 3 attempts gained by Ryan Otis versus Shajee Zuhair. James Logsdon, meanwhile, very similar. So Zuhair at the moment, very strong in the first half of the lap. He's matching Otis pound for pound on the first half of the lap. It's in the second half of the lap where Otis is quicker, and Logsdon is not as strong as Zuhair in the first half of the lap, but he's quick. He's almost at the pace of Otis with the second half. So that's the difference in cars here. And drivers, the Porsches, they really do love those low-speed bends, of which the Walsh chicane has all the low speed you can get, plus club. Meanwhile, that BMW on the more open part of the circuit, where the speeds are higher, has got the better pace by comparison. So a very interesting trade-off. Meanwhile, Julian Jones, well, in terms of his sectors, he's been catching up to Jermaine Warren recently, as we do ride aboard the dashboard here of your number 69. All looking nice so far. And well, for Julian Jones at this point, after a slow start, now trying to go back on the attack, and everybody is as they were in terms of their positions versus where they started the race. Goodness me, that's sunset in the distance. That's blinding coming out of Stowe Bend for our drivers, and understandably, you've got very limited visibility in the cockpit of some of these cars, none more so than the Ford GT. And well, I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, anybody who raced the Ford GT in real life and raced it on the simulator here at iRacing, credit to them, because this car was not built for forward vision. I can tell you that. It was built to be as aerodynamic as possible, and whilst you can see out of it the visibility you have compared to other GT machines, particularly let's say the Porsche 911 RSI and the Corvette C8R, well, it is to be left to be desired. Well, as Julian Jones makes way through, big mistake there for Jermaine Warren to go that deep. How just about keeps it on the road. Now Warren there would have lent very hard on left and to right tyres, so as a result he's got to just be a bit careful. Now of course the GT tyre model that we do have is one where you can cook the tyres, but they are easily recoverable compared to their predecessors. The tyre model that was introduced at the start of this year, which saw rain added to the GT category as well for 2026, whereas the previous tyre model before that, if you made a mistake in a GT and you overheated the tyres, you said goodbye to the tyres. You could not get them back unless you drove completely off pace for about 3 to 4 laps, depending on the circuit, whereas now we do have a tyre model that's a bit more forgiving, but it doesn't quite offer as much grip as the previous tyre model in peak. As Zuhair makes his way through Cox Bend, both running wide there, both using all the road and plenty more. We call that value-added tarmac. But unfortunately, you have to pay the price. It was an instant point to use VAT. And it comes down through turns 10, 11, 12 and 13. Makes it to Beckett's once again. Shajee Zuhair definitely feeling that pressure towards the end of the opening 10 minutes of this race. But it's been exciting opening 10 minutes. And well, we've got these battles gradually building. But the privateer holding a firm gap at the moment and trying to keep it all nice and smooth. As he does so, we're going to take a quick look back, ladies and gentlemen, at some of the big moments so far, including how the race got underway. Now, as we did go green flag racing, look into the blimp camera. In fact, no, we won't, because it will be obscured by what will be the paddock grandstands. As our drivers made the way away, it was a good start for Shajee Zuhair, although James Logsdon in the end had the better start of the two as they made their way into Abbey. Before the way, he went up the inside. Meanwhile, the Julian Jones took a lot of curve there, and I think the rear of that Ford GT slid loose slightly, so that's why Jones backed off. Only then to have to fight on the inside of Glen Bratton in towards turn number 3, so he made the return move there into Village. But that's how the race got underway, and everyone kept their cool and carried on. But after James Logsdon was able to fight his way past Shajee Zuhair and Jones repassed Glen Bratton, what happened after that, here you ask? Well, on lap number 2, we had this. Shajee Zuhair fight his way past Logsdon, and Logsdon made his way in towards turn number 3, and as he did so, went a bit late on the brakes there and decided not to push on the brakes any further. He just simply let the car run slightly wide, and Zuhair had to go round the outside of the loop to get it done and used all the road and a bit of the curb to do so. Well, a very brave move there from Shajee Zuhair. And that's how he took second place. A small error from Logsdon, but Zuhair had to really commit to the bit in order to make the magic happen. But with that, we head back to your live racing. And as we do come back, still plenty more racing to come, no doubt about it, as the drivers carry on. Still 34 minutes or so in the race, plus a final lap. And has anything changed? Well, what has definitely changed is that Logsdon is getting closer and closer here as we ride aboard with your third place runner. And going through to the 12 into 30 at the moment, through the Maggots and the Beckett's complex. Team Bear Poke driver, better exit there. This has got to surely be his chance now. Here he goes as he builds up the speed, heading up the gearbox in 5th, getting ready for 6th gear shortly. And as he does so, peel into the inside. It's going to be looking up the inside into Stowe. BMW in the outside. Bush of Logsdon on the inside. Zahair's going to try and defend it as much as he can. And will he be able to hold it all the way down to the Vale here? And Zahairian has to back off. No, and he can't run any wider. But he's going to go onto the brakes. He's trying to beat the Porsche when it's at best, which is braking. And, well, James Logsdon does make that move. But a brilliant battle between the two of them there, and I don't think it's over yet, although Shajee Zuhair now, does he prefer to be the hunter rather than the hunted? We'll see, as we do run aboard our BMW M8 drivers. He makes his way on to lap number 7. Now, understandably, some drivers, they prefer to be the hunter. They've got a marker to follow rather than the one being hunted. And it is all a psychological thing with regards to being in a car, whether it's on the simulator or in real life, in the fact that when you are in these very close battles between yourself and the driver on a similar pace, when you are the lead car, what you end up doing more and more, and many drivers will talk about it from their own experience, myself included, is you start to focus more on the driver behind and what they're doing rather than what you are doing. And in doing so, you naturally actually start to lose pace. You don't realise it, but you unconsciously start to change your braking approach. You start to change your throttle inputs and also your steering wheel inputs, because you're constantly thinking about what is the other guy doing rather than yourself. So when you are the leader in these battles, what you have to do, you have to be aware there's a car behind you, but until they go for a move, you essentially have to try and ignore them as much as possible. And in doing so, you maintain your own lines, because remember, you are the lead car, therefore you have all the clear air in front, unless you're in a three-way fight and you're the car in the middle of the sandwich. But in this case, we've only got 2 cars there, so that's the exception, not the norm. Whereas if you're Shajee Zuhair, you've got to be constantly looking at the Porsche in front. That's James Logsdon, of course, because you've got to be thinking about the concertina effect there, which essentially states if the car in front brakes, you have to brake just that little bit earlier in order to be able to avoid going into the back of them. The opposite is true, of course, of the fact with the dirty air, you need to turn into the corner slightly earlier to offset the understeer that's invoked because of the aerodynamic wash. But Zuhair now doesn't have to worry about what's behind him, and what he has to worry about is what's in front of him. So this might just psychologically play to his advantage, because he does like to hunt, as we see Logsdon going a bit deep there, going through turn number 15. Zuhair's made some of the made some major overtakes this season. I stumbled over my words, as indeed Logsdon stumbled through Stowe, and I think he's triggered a bit of a stumble here in the commentary booth as well. We get ourselves back together as much as possible. But right now, I think for Zuhair, overtaking is his love for the racing. Being the one to defend is not something he enjoys as much. Jermaine Warren, meanwhile, runs a bit wide there. Julian Jones still trying to chase it down. So Jones is absolutely hurried on this. And well, the Ford GTE driver has found his pace. The only problem is, as much as he's found the pace now to be on the back of Jermaine Warren, it's not going to be easy to get past. Again, this Ford GT is all about carrying corner speed. It's not the strongest on the straights, nor is it the weakest, but compared to that BMW, it's not going to have the pace. But if you can get into the aerodynamic pool and get within, say, 3/10 of Warren, he's going to pick up a absolutely massive toe, make his way down the likes of the Wellington or the Hangar Straight. The Wellington Straight's just a little bit too short here, and the exit speed out of Aintree isn't enough to be able to make it pronounced enough for him to be able to catch up. Meanwhile, coming out onto Hangar, it is just that little bit quicker. But you see Jones, they're going a bit deep through Brooklands into Luffield, and that's the problem as well, because he's so reliant on the downforce at this point. He's feeling the effects of that dirty air, and for Julian Jones, what might be an option now as we headed towards the pit window, and given the 50% fuel tanks, we do expect the pit window opens about 15 minutes into race and closes with about 10 minutes to go, depending on the circuit. Sometimes we've seen it go longer, sometimes we've seen it go shorter. Julian Jones may want to consider an undercut here, because I think if he's got clear track, he will be the quicker driver compared to Warren in the race, at least at this point, whereas if he's stuck behind at the moment, he is really battling against the elements. He's battling upstream, but it's not impossible, to be fair, as we do see him take a much more conservative approach coming out of Beckett through Chapel. But there you can see, because he's been so conservative, that gap to Warren's opened up to half a second. Yes, it's now coming down, but they are already 2/3 of the way down at the Hangar Straight before he's even got it down a 10th. And that's the problem for Julian Jones. He just cannot get that gap to come down enough at the moment to be able to really make a viable attack. And, well, there's going to be another lap spent behind him instead. But meanwhile, new fastest lap of the race for your race leader at 55.657. A very impressive lap there. The best part of 1.2 seconds quicker than anybody else. And Ryan Otis right now starting to open up an increasing lead. 4.4 seconds currently as he comes into turn 3. And you do see James Logsdon and Shajee Zuhair behind. So for Otis, now that he's really stabilised that lead, he's seen the battle for second is taking priority for Logsdon and Zuhair. His full process is, well, now I can start to open up the taps occasionally and just increase lead. Once he gets it up to 5 seconds, he will be relatively safe on strategy. Normally, the cutover with regards to fuel saving in these races is a maximum of 3 seconds that you can potentially gain on arrival in the pits just on the stationary time. Of course, pit entry and pit exit can play a big part in it, and the Silverstone Grand Prix Circuit's pit lane entry is a bit of an oddity in the fact that you essentially come charging down through the Vale into the pit lane, and as you turn through the corner to enter the pits, you've got to get onto the limiter practically immediately. Won't be the easiest pit lane to enter into. A lot easier to exit, however, given the fact you exit parallel on the outside of turn number 2. But coming into the pit, some drivers will take it a lot more conservatively, and those who do, they could lose 2 to 3 seconds on pit lane entry. So it could all add up to around 6 seconds of a turnover in the pit lane. Logsdon right now at least won't be thinking about that. We'll be thinking have a practice the pit lane entry, which some do not. But coming through, makes it to Beckett's this time. First and foremost, he's got to try and make sure he keeps Zuhair behind. And there's Warren and Jones. Jones a bit close to that time going into Maggots. He was 2.5 tenths away. So perhaps Julian Jones is finding some time now, as Warren again just a little bit wide there coming out of Beckett's into Chapel. In fact, that gap is coming down quite quickly. Jermaine Warren's small mistake, but it is going to have massive repercussions. And well, 2 tenths there just going into Stowe. Jones almost there to attack at this point. Gets a really good run coming off the corner as well. Does he dare lunge it here? Well, Jermaine Warren's going to go defensive into the braking zone. On to brakes he goes, as you can hear the screech of the disc as the brake pads get applied and come loose. And well, as right now Jermaine Warren comes through a turn at number 18. Half this race almost complete, and right now he's definitely starting to feel that pressure from Jones. He's getting closer and closer. Well, looking further back, Glenn Bratton leading prime drive, sole prime at the moment. We'll keep it nice and smooth here, but his lap time's not quite on the pace of leaders. But to be fair, keep it nice and cool, keeping it clean on the road as well. And there's something to be said about having a nice clean race at Silverstone. But as he comes on through, meanwhile, James Logsdon and Shajee Zuhair come out of Aintree. And hold up a second, that is Julian Jones. Where's he gone? And where's Jermaine Warren? Well, both have had a bit of a trip there at the loop. Something's gone very wrong. I wonder if Jermaine Warren's had a spin and Jones has had to react at the last moment and take to the runoff area there to avoid going into the way with BMW. But it's the first major mistake we've seen from any driver today. And, well, even the very best can make mistakes out there. What exactly has happened? Well, ladies and gents, the good news is we can get you a replay of that and some other moments as well. And we're going to start off by taking a look back at the move Logsdon made to retake second place over Shajee Zuhair. Now, this was the battle for second place, and after a brilliant run from Maggots into Beckett's on lap 6, it was a question of when Logsdon would go for it, and we decided to go up the inside into Stowe, but it wasn't quite done immediately. Zuhair tried to hold it round the outside, but just ran out of road there, and Logsdon knew he could shut the door on him. Zuhair looked back up the inside, but then realised he was never going to beat the Porsche on the brakes of his BMW, but glued to the back in there as they came towards the end of the lap. And what a brilliant battle it was, but Logsdon retaking that second place at least for the time being. So then on lap number 10, we had this for Jermaine Warren. Now this was Warren making his way through Village and in towards the loop. Low speed hairpin here. You can see Jones getting very aggressive, but out the corner. Oh, goodness me. And well, now we know the story there. It was Jermaine Warren had lost the rear coming beyond the apex. I think that might have been just a little bit too aggressive a downshift there. And it caused the rear right tyre to lose traction. And well, for Julian Jones, he had to take very late evasive action, but did not successfully evade to the point where he did make some contact. But this is what it looked like on board Julian Jones. And well, as he made his way into the corner, went for a bit of a tighter line there, but unfortunately did hit Warren on the rear. But I think that'll be put down as a racing instance, as stewards understand, because where could Jones have gone will be his argument, and I think we'd agree with him from his on board there. But of course they'll have a chat about it, Jones and Warren, but they're good friends off the circuit as well as rivals on the circuit. I'm sure there'll come to some sort of agreement on how that all played out. Something tells me that'll be a racing instant, and very unfortunate for Jermaine Warren when that mistake. Also for Jones picking up damage, and we can see the replay footage. You can see how that damage to the front end of the cars actually upset his ability to control it to a degree, so that might come back to haunt him later on. But with that, back to your live race we go. As we do come back with Jermaine Warren for now. Warren trying to keep it together here, but understandably with some damage to the car. The damage for him will be rear end damage. Now what that will do is it will make the car a little bit looser through medium to high speed corners, depending on the severity of the contact and what it's actually done to the rear aero, and also if it has had any impact to the rear suspension. Hopefully not, but given the fact they are well within the pit window and they have a fast repair available, if either driver was to come in, they would be able to get the car repaired very quickly. And the way the fast repair works And essentially turn it on with regards to your pit strategy in iRacing using the black boxes or the inbuilt race overlay, where you're allowed to make your strategic adjustments. And the game plan is you turn on the fast repair and the team will immediately repair the car. It's almost as if they've been given a lot of Red Bull or a lot of caffeine, and the team can completely get it done within 2 to 3 seconds, rather than what can be in these GT machines repair times of upwards of 5 to 6 minutes. Of course, not in the instance of the damage that they will have to each other. It would be around about 30 to 40 seconds, typically, if my guess is correct. However, if you redo total a GT car, it used to be sometimes the repair work would take the best part of half an hour, and when you typically miss an entire race, whether it be in the middle of the pack racing league or to the iRacing GTE official sprint series. But those repair times have been brought down to be in alignment with other series on iRacing, other machinery, and it's definitely been appreciated by the racing community. And of course, GTEs do have a very dedicated racing community on iRacing. And many did get quite upset the day, as did I personally, the day it was announced that GT firstly would be retired in IMSA, retired back in 2018, and it would be retired from the FIA World Endurance Championship as of 2023. Its final year, and of course the final race of the GT category being won by the Iron Dames, the all-female outfit in the wonderful pink Porsche. But the reason why GT was retired was for 2 major reasons. Firstly, the cost, whereby the GT category to run was a bit more expensive compared to the modern-day GT3 category that was really popularised by Stefan Rattel's SRO organisation, or typically known as GT World Challenge, previously known as the Blancpain GT Series, all the way up to 2018, and it changed to its more commonly known guise, which applies now around the world, where it be in GT World Challenge Europe, GT World Challenge America, or GT World Challenge Asia. And GT3 seen as more cost effective, but also a bit more of an approachable car, and the approachability all around the ABS, essentially the lack of anti-lock braking system in GTE, something you have to get used to, in the fact that you are the one who controls the brakes as a driver. You don't have an electronic system that essentially helps you out if you do push the brake pedal a bit too hard, and that's why getting used to essentially only using a certain amount of brake initially on entry into a corner, so you start off around about 50 to 70%, and then you perhaps maximise it to 90% as you come down to your peak braking point. That's how you avoid the lockouts. But each car is different. No 2 cars are the same in GTE. And of course, one of the big cars that we are missing from iRacing, hopefully one day we do get it. Indeed, I'm never going to lose hope for it, ladies and gentlemen, is the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. One of the very last GTEs that was on the grid alongside the Corvette C8R, plus also the Porsche 911 RSR. And well, we did lose the BMW back in 2021, was its final year, if my memory serves me correctly. And the Ferraris, I do believe they raced all the way up to 2022. Of course, GT definitely has some interesting characters. The Ford GT, a very interesting character. Indeed, a car that if you speak to a number of racing fans, they either absolutely love it, or you could say, in a way, this is really the Marmite car, because a lot will look at the Ford GT and go that it's an illegal car. Now, the reason why many call it an illegal car is because of the fact that an exception had to be made. Remember, in the fact that GT cars, they have to be based on road production cars, of which 2,500 had to have been built as part of the homologation rules. The Ford GT, only the best part of around 100 were ever built. However, at the time, in the regulations, it was possible for teams and manufacturers to get an exception from the rule, so long as they provided enough reason for it. And well, if my memory serves me correctly, the Ford GTE race car that you see here in the hands of Julian Jones was built before the road car was built. So it was done the other way round, and well, Ford wanted to go racing, of course, to try and recapture their glory of the days of the Ford versus Ferrari era of Le Mans 1966, of which they were able to in the Ford GTE, whereby they did win against Ferrari in 2016, I want to say, although don't quote me on that. Somebody will probably tell me the right year. Indeed, I'm trying to fish through my brain at the moment, which has got a lot of odd bods of information. And well, Julian Jones makes his way onwards, definitely in the car that has split many over the years, but one thing that won't split everyone, and the fact it is an absolutely beautiful car out there as the nighttime begins to descend here at Silverstone. But as we come back to James Logsdon and focus a bit more in on the battling that's going on with 20 minutes left to go. Well, Logsdon right now with Shajee Zuhair behind, and Zuhair is just slipping away a little bit in terms of lap time. That last lap, the gap between the two of them was 2 tenths there, gained in the favour of Logsdon, a 56.57 to a 56.80 Zuhair. And I think right now James Logsdon is starting to get a bit of an upper hand here in terms of race pace. Although saying that, any moment it could all change. But remember, what is Zuhair doing behind him? Now, is he pushing as hard as he possibly can? Or is he now starting to think about the bigger picture? Because we are heading towards more of those pit stops. Is he perhaps thinking, actually, the reality of this, I don't need to beat Logsdon on the road. I can beat him in the pit lane. And therefore, so long as I stay within, say, a second and I save the fuel and match his pace, I might just be able to beat him and get back out on the circuit. And we did see that it took a lot of effort from Logsdon to be able to find a way past the hair. It's always a fault. But, well, another mistake there. Another BMW goes round. That's Glenn Bratton who's got around there at the loop. So that corner is now caught out two BMWs. It caught out Jermaine Warren earlier on. And that's caught out Glenn Bratton. We'll get a replay of that shortly. But Sol Pram Drum making a small mistake. But make no mistake, he's still going there. The car going strong. The tyres will be a little bit warmer now than they once were. But given the relatively cool conditions here today, I suspect for Glenn Bratton amongst many, well, those tyres are not going to be feeling too much of a pinch. And in terms of the weather conditions, well, we do have only a track temperature of 67 degrees Fahrenheit with an ambient of 66 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a very cool circuit. So therefore, the only problem that our drivers may have is they are trying to find some tyre temperature. If the circuit gets cool enough, then you've really got to try and pump the tyres with as much heat as possible. But that humidity, 88%. Well, no sign of rain here today as far as we're aware, with that partial cloud, but definitely a very humid day, which is what you would expect in the midst of May in the United Kingdom. Indeed, a very interesting climate, although some would say that Silverstone has its own climate, although every circuit in the UK is associated with having its own climate, given the way the UK weather plays out. But Glenn Bratton right now carrying on his journey, albeit 18.5 seconds away from Jermaine Warren at this time. Now, speaking of Warren and Julian Jones, well, Jermaine Warren may have had the spin and got off the worst of the two of them a few laps ago, but he is catching very quickly to Julian Jones. And that last lap from Jones, a 57.42, Warren a 57.25. Well, as Glenn Bratton comes into the pit lane, he's going to be the first to make his way in, and he'll show us very shortly exactly how tight that pit lane is as he makes his way down pit road. And we do look to the alternative camera. You can see there onto limiter and now turn through the corner. That's where it's such a tricky pit lane to get right on entry. Go too deep and you'll hit what will be the strategic stands. The last thing you want to do. But coming back to the fault, Jermaine Warren is closing to Julian Jones. And he's doing so quite quickly. So with pit stop coming up, is Warren going to go back on the attack, or is he going to come in, probably take the fast repair as well, just to help nurse the car back up to prime health? And the MOP racing driver could yet spring a surprise before this race is all said and done. As Bratton, well, he's been through the pits, and as he's done so, well, he's made his one and only pit stop, I believe. Just going to double check on that. Or has he made it a drive-through penalty? Because we have not had a stationary time for Glenn Bratton. We're about to find out. And the answer to that is, as the drive's coming through, I believe we've had a drive-through penalty for Glenn Bratton, and that's why he's come in. So that spin has sent him over 10 instant points, and, well, he's had to serve that penalty. So he's the first one to pick up a black flag drive-through. He has not actually taken his stop. Meanwhile, Ryan Otis is in, and I'm very confident this will be for what will be a pit stop. This will not be a drive-through penalty as James Logsdon comes in as well. So, in the end, the fuel tanks are running low. They all come in. Shajee Zuhair comes in directly behind. Zuhair actually gains on pit entry. And now we wait 17 seconds for Julian Jones to come in, theoretically. As he comes on down from Stowe in towards the Vale. And he goes another lap, does Julian Jones. So he decides it's not time for him to pit, and Jermaine Warren decides the same. So they're going to carry on. Ryan Otis being served at the moment, car parked up. But Julian Jones at this point will go on to lead a lap of the race, at least here at Silverstone today. With 15.5 minutes to go, he goes on to lap 16. And while the team will be very happy to see that car at the top of the tyres out, even if it is just for a lap, then it's always a little bit of pride to lead a lap of a race. Ryan Otis leaves the pit lane. He comes out quite clear of the two who have continued another lap. He's the strategic leader. James Logsdon, meanwhile, leaves. There's Shajee Zuhair behind. And Logsdon again gaining 3 tenths in the pit lane compared to Zuhair. So that gap has opened up now to 1.6 seconds end-to-end in the pits. So Shajee Zuhair had a slightly longer pit stop, and his pit end-to-end time was, in fact, 6 tenths longer by comparison. So all in, he's lost 6 tenths to Logsdon, but he can always try to gain that back. But now this is going to be a game of who can switch their tyres back on the quickest. Because remember, whilst they have been stationary for 11.5 seconds or so, they have lost some tyre temperature. They've lost about 6 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit to the outside of the tyre. The inside's lost a bit more heat by comparison, and they've now got to heat it back up. But those tyres will definitely still have plenty of life in them, even with how hard they've worked on them thus far. Glenn Bratton in. This is for his pit stop, so he's done his drive-through penalty for instant points, and now he is making his one and only stop, and the car being serviced there. But at the front, Jones versus Warren. We've got two leaders who've yet to pit, and well, when they do come into the pits, we believe they'll be relegated back to the fight for 4th place. But here's Jones holding on for now, with Warren getting closer through what is the non-medium speed corner sequence there. Max into Beckett's the first half a lap. Warren a lot quicker. In fact, coming out of Beckett's there, Jermaine Warren gained a whole 4 attempts. Julian Jones, I'm not quite sure. I wonder if it's the damage on that Ford at the moment where he made the contact to the back of Warren's car. He seems to have these moments where he just finds so much more time. They're both going through it, and I think it is, well, they'll both want to put the faster pair on, but it'll be interesting to see how the second stint this race plays out between them. They're inseparable, but they gain time and lose on each other so aggressively. Oh, my goodness! And that's Jermaine Warren going around into pit lane entry there. Well, that's not normal too. That's one way to go into the pits at Silverstone, but it's not the conventional way. And for Jermaine Warren, well, that surely now is going to throw this race into complete disrepute for him, as he gets himself up to speed. But right now for Jermaine Warren, and the way he's gone into bits as well, I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be a pit stop. And you see, we're going to be a stop and hold penalty, or alternatively a drive-through penalty, because that'll be instant points picked up. And I think for Jermaine Warren, with that pit lane entry, things have gone from good to bad to disastrous in the space of one very light braking zone. But meanwhile, at the front of the field with 13 laps to go, Ryan Otis right now 9 seconds clear, in control. James Logsdon and Shajee Zuhair battle for second, and Zuhair has got that gap back down to 1.2 seconds already. He is absolutely hustling his BMW, trying to go for it, and Julian Jones has left the pit lane. And surely now for Jones, this has got to be a very comfortable 4th place, because Jermaine Warren is still being serviced. So I suspect the car is being held there for a stop and a hold penalty, which can be served alongside the pit stop when you pick it up. You don't have to go back around and serve it separately. That would be a stop and go penalty. If so, it is a stop hold, which means the car can be worked on, but it has to be, the penalty has to be served as well separately to the car being worked on. So Warren is being held there, and well, in the end, it was a 37.62 second stop. So as he makes his way back out, well, is he going to have to come back in again for a drive-through for instant points? We will wait and see, but if so, Glenn Bratton, who makes his way through turn number 1 now, this could be a chance for the Pro-Am driver to bring home 5th place here today. But we'll find out in due course. But the first thing we need to find out is what exactly happened to Jermaine Warren, and here we go, ladies and gentlemen, for a quick replay of what was a very difficult pit entry for the MOP racing driver. So this was as he made his way to his pit stall there. So I think we're getting a little bit too early of the footage, but one moment and we will be getting the footage now. And I do believe, ladies and gents, we go back just that little bit earlier. And here we go to the mistake for Jermaine Warren. And this was Warren coming on through turn number 15 through Stowe and in towards the pit lane he went. Let's listen in. Oh, goodness me, he mistimed his pit entry there and, well, went onto the brakes too heavily. And you saw that on the right-hand side of his central console, what's the yellow lights come on, and those are the brake locking lights there. And for Jermaine Warren, I think he mistimed when to brake for the pit lane, and not having that knowledge, perhaps, or just being a bit too enthusiastic to come in, has cost him massively, because the rear brakes locked first. Well, the brakes locked up, but the rear's released before the front brakes, and that completely propelled the car round. And with a slight bit of a left-hand steering input, the rear right in particular would have projected the car round like that. And for Jermaine Warren, that definitely would have been an unsafe pit entry. That's why he's had a stop hold, and I suspect he will have a drive-through penalty afterwards as well for that loss of control. With that, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see his rival pulling away in the pit lane, quite perfect timing there to see it all fall out of his hands. We go back to your live racing. As we do come back, Glenn Bratton, the man of our focus, we come back to the live action, 10.5 minutes to go. And right now, for Glenn Bratton, all keeping it smooth. Jermaine Warren is in the pit lane, but where is he in relation to Bratton? Well, there he is heading on down. And as he does so, well, for Warren at this point, this will purely be a drive-through penalty here. We thought he picked one up as a result of instant points. And, well, that is definitely a big, heavy hit there in the fact that he had already had the unsafe pit entry. That in itself, before speeding into the pit lane, albeit unconventionally backwards into the pit lane, it must be said, that would have been a stop and hold penalty. And then subsequently for Warren, because he had picked up enough instant points, plus the instant points he already had from off tracks and his loss of control earlier on, and the contact with Julian Jones, that would have been a 4x. I suspect he would have been on about 8 or 9 instant points. Or the loss of control there, plus going off circuit to the grass as part of his spin on pit lane entry, that would enough to bring him the drive through. So for Jermaine Warren, he's now got 10 minutes to close down, 10 seconds to Glenn Bratton. Can he do it? Can he prevent the Pro-Am driver from taking the place over for the pros? We'll have to wait and see. But that means only 5 laps after the one they're currently on, because they've not been put down a lap as of yet. Ryan Otis, I think, is too far back to try and put him a lap down, as he is making his way through the loop at the moment and up towards Aintree. And that is the best part of around 40 seconds of lap time he's got to find there to at least Jermaine Warren, if not Glenn Bratton. So we'll have to see how far he can go there. But right now, I don't think there's going to be enough time. So everyone will finish on the lead lap. It's just going to be a bit of a spread in the field to do so. But meanwhile, whilst Ryan Otis is definitely trying to spread himself away from the rest of the pack, James Logsdon and Shajee Zuhair, 1.2 seconds clear at this time, and your BMW driver, he has really found himself hitting a bit of a wall now at around 1.1 to 1.2 seconds, and I think James Logsdon just trying to keep this in his grasp, albeit it only takes one mistake, and suddenly we could see Zuhair right there, alternating fall completely away. So that's the exciting factor of this battle now. This is really coming down to who's the most consistent, and for Logsdon, well, he lost out by 6 thousandths in qualifying, but he made up for that with a daring move on lap number 6 into Stowe and forced Zuhair to have to make a decision of whether to attack or not into the Vale. And in the end, Zuhair realising late on that the BMW didn't have the brakes of the Porsche, and we had to make that last minute judgment call. As he weaves and winds his way through the corners right now, well, your privateer definitely throwing everything at this. But what you can see is that tyre wear starts to pick up a bit more. Well, now he's going to be that little bit more careful through the corners. He hasn't quite got the tyre in its maximal prime at the moment. He'll be running about 90% of the grip it would normally have, but he's still got plenty of tyre life out there. And if he gets it right, he can push this tyre. The tyre goes through phases, if you will. You can get a couple of push laps out of it, then you have to cool it back down. But understand, it very quickly cools down. It really is just a lap that you cool it down, then you can push for a couple more laps and rinse and repeat. But he's really also starting to get that line together in the Vale, a bit more aggressive in terms of keeping the car to the left there for the second part of the chicane. That's helping him out. I think he's seen that Logsdon's doing it, has decided I need to do a bit more of a Logsdon approach through there, and that's why now the sector times between the turn through the final sector actually are now getting better for Zuhair versus Logsdon. So he's found that time as he goes in towards turn 3 for the 20th time of asking. Coming out the corner, Logsdon has just set a purple opening couple of corners. His first sector has been purple, so Logsdon finding some pace out there. And, well, understanding Zuhair a little bit further behind, in fact 1.5 tenths of the gap. But again, the Porsche expected to be the stronger of the two cars, returns 1, 2 and 3, given the fact you've got that quick fire direction change at high speed, followed by heavy braking zone and a low speed hairpin. Right now, Shajee Zuhair in the next sector is a bit quicker by comparison. So it all adds up between these two. But that's the exciting factor of both cars here, and the fact we've got strengths and weaknesses on display. From there, we look to Julian Jones in a very lonely 4th place Ford now, having lost its dance partner Jermaine Warren after his interesting pit entry. And Glenn Bratton, meanwhile, not 12 seconds, the best part there of around about, I want to say, 30 seconds behind Julian Jones, albeit on the last couple of laps, Glenn Bratton has actually been faster than Julian Jones. So Bratton is picking up some pace here, and we're good on the Prime driver doing so. And that's what it's about being a Prime driver. It's about respecting the fact you're not the quickest out there, but you're here to learn. And Bratton's pace right now is picking up versus Jones. Jermaine Warren's a bit quicker, but Bratton's pace has been getting quicker and quicker as the race has gone. He seems to be a lot more comfortable in the car when there's less fuel in it in comparison to when it's a heavy fuel car. And if he can get used to the car in its early stage of the race, there's no reason why he can't be on the pace of Jones and Warren at the Circuit Spa Francorchamps in 2 weeks' time. Where so, it could be very interesting to see how far he can go there, and whether, should Tom Bryce be back on the grid, whether he can get the upper hand on Bryce. Bryce not here today, so by default Bratton will take the Prime win. Understandably, I think he'd like to take him head on and beat him at least that once this season, and we look forward to him trying to do so for a Prime win there. But there will be a Prime win for Glenn Bratton today as he comes up through Woodcote and on towards the National Straight. There's Ryan Otis heads on around. Well, the Porsche 911 RSR driver we haven't seen too much of because he's just been bolting away in his number 3. Well, still keeping it together, as meanwhile, slight connectivity issue for Julian Jones. Surely that's not a sign of something to come. Hopefully that's not a sign of an impending retirement from the race there due to a technical issue with his Ford GT. Well, fingers crossed not. We want to see every car make it to the finish line wherever possible. James Logsdon right now, well, still trying to manage that gap to Zuhair, and again keeping it around the 1.1 to 1.3 second mark, but it is constantly oscillating, and that is where the difficulty lies. These two so close on pace. The last lap, Logsdon was quicker by 2 tenths compared to Zuhair, but this time around it could be the other way around. They could be even. Indeed, there's not much give in the two of them, and well, it's to take now for that second place. And remember, for both of them, This result will mean that they are going to stay ahead of Ryan Otis in the championship campaign, particularly for James Logsdon. But Logsdon will know going to the season finale, the gaps will come on down, and Ryan Otis will be an absolutely huge threat for the overall Pro Championship coming the end of this season. What a championship campaign it has been so far. So many big names out there over the course of the season. And for James Logsdon, he's really been the one consistent name at the very forefront of the Pro Championship. But Shajee Zuhair closing as he heads down the straight, and we're going down hanger in towards Stowe. We've right on board this time, and obviously with the sun setting and no direct sunlight anymore, markers are starting to change. The headlights go on these cars, and they look absolutely beautiful in the dusk hour. Not quite full night time at the moment. The Silverstone circuit, when it is full night time, is a very difficult circuit to race at. I can tell you that from experience, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit of a story about me. My first ever 24-hour race was the first ever Brit car 24 Hours of Silverstone on iRacing, so that would have been all the way back in 2022. And well, given the fact I'd never driven the BMW M4 GT3 at the time, we were in the GT3 class, the team I was part of, well, I was required to do multiple night stints. I'd never driven Silverstone on the simulator of iRacing before, let alone do it in the dark, and I had to learn how to do it in the dark, so I spent the best part of 5.5 hours driving in the dark. They're doing the second most laps of a 4-driver team, and well, it definitely was a bit of an interesting day. There was one very famous face who raced that one who definitely had a few things to say about me with regards to being a night driver and a relative rookie by comparison, and they weren't the nicest things, let's put it that way. But I made sure not to make any mistakes or inconvenience anyone until my car ended up on the live stream having its complete rear end torn off with an absolute horror show of an instant going down the start finish straight. But if you want to know more about that, it's definitely something to check out on the RaceBot TV channel, because the BMW that I was in definitely got a bit of coverage when it all went wrong. But still, things going right. Shajee Zuhair right now definitely going on the attack versus James Logsdon. And there he goes on the attack. The BMW driver win 9/10 this time, and well, 2.5 minutes left to go here under the dusk hour. The lights fully on there, the endurance racing lights, and right now the BMW getting closer and closer, little by little. The M8, the road car that definitely is a beast and an absolute monster on the road as well in terms of racing, replaced of course by the BMW M4. And going from V8 machinery to turbo supplemented 6-cylinder machinery, although it's a turbo that's supplementing the V8 there. And we're coming on through Stowe Bend at the moment. Still a second is the gap as he comes towards the end of this lap. As meanwhile, our leader, Ryan Otis, goes on to his final tour of the circuit. I do believe we'll get 23 laps here. We are not going to squeeze in a 24th, given how close the time is. So the race will be called on our 23rd lap. And in doing so right now, well, the only battle really left to decide or decipher is the battle for second place. Will it be Logsdon or will it be Zuhair? And they're only apart by 9/10. And right now, James Logsdon, as we look back from the rear of the Team Bear Poke machine, well, with the gap he's got to feel some degree of comfort here. And I can tell you in the battle between Bratton and Warren for 5th place, the Crown Giant is still 6.5 seconds ahead of Jermaine Warren at this time, and will be just about safe. Even if Jermaine Warren has a lightning quick final lap, they are on their penultimate lap, of course, whereas the leaders have gone on to their final lap. Well, the leaders will not lap 5th and 6th at this point in time. It does mean that right now Glenn Bratton will be on course for a very encouraging 5th place finish today, even though Warren is throwing everything at it to try and close the gap down. As Logsdon goes a bit deep there of Luffield, and in fact the car's shaking around, getting now down to 8/10 there. Small mistake from Logsdon, doesn't make too many, and we did have that mistake at the start of the race, losing out. But right now it definitely looks as though that's the only other mistake he's made. We'll spin it deep into the corner. You can see the rear of the car letting go, but I can imagine as well that's tired arms and legs as well as tired tyres. We're going in towards Magnussen to Beckett's. The hair a little bit closer, little by little, as we ride on board the dashboard of the privateer number 10. And we're coming through now into Beckett's here. You can see those tight lines he has to take to offset the dirtier and the front engine rear-wheel drive nature of that BMW. It does not make life any easier as he heads down the hanger straight. For that gap, 6/10. It's still quite a way away, but as their battle seems to be a way away, well, ladies and gentlemen, we come back to your leader, and for Ryan Otis, well, it was pole position by quite the margin, but he was kept honest in the early stages, and when the battle for second place took priority between Logsdon and Zuhair, for Ryan Otis, he was allowed to run away, and it is his 3rd win of the season for the privateer overall in Pro here at Silverstone today. About who will be second just behind? Well, with James Logsdon, he's been harassed, he's been chased, but he hasn't given up, and he takes second place at Team Bearpoke ahead of Shajee Zuhair, who was behind by 6/10 at the finish line. What a battle between these two at the end. second and third overall and in the pro category, and it means that Logsdon will lead going into the season finale, but Ryan Otis and Shajee Zuhair will constantly be hot on his heels, but as they do cool them down, we've still got a few more drives to come on through, and well, Julian Jones will be the next one, currently running in fourth. But as he does so in his Ford GT, we look to Glenn Bratton for a moment, and right now for Bratton, well, the pace is there. His previous lap 59.14, but almost 2.5 seconds quicker was Jermaine Warren. You can see coming over the hill in the background. And, well, we were going to, what's that coming over the hill? Is it a monster? Well, some would say it is. Some would say it's the Giga Grill of a BMW M8. And one is absolutely flying, as meanwhile, Julian Jones makes his way through the Vale and in towards Club. And will the Ford GT drive in the end, despite some difficulty early on, brings it home in fourth place. Well done to him in the 69, getting the upper hand of Jermaine Warren today. But who will be fifth meanwhile? Will it be Bratton? Will it be Warren? Well, that gap is now down to 4 seconds. It is coming down sensationally quick, but right now for Glenn Bratton, he started sixth, looked good in qualifying, made one mistake, that spin at the loop, but beyond that, well, he's going to hold on here for fifth place today. A brilliant drive from the man who had the driver in the speed, but he didn't give up, and he will be your prime winner, and he will be your fifth place overall finish there in the privateer BMW, and Jermaine Warren will come through the final couple of quarters, and for him, with the mistake on entry into the pit lane, it all went very wrong, and he decides to take out his frustration by throwing the car into the gravel trap there as he crossed the finish line, but the MOP racing driver takes sixth, our final finishing position, and that completes our race for today, ladies and gentlemen. But what a race here at Silverstone, a fantastic race to watch, and our drivers do cool them down. Let's take a look to the scenic view, and with it, the race results. And as we can see, after what has been a fast and furious 45 minutes of racing for round 7 of 8 in the middle of the pack of Racing League GTE League for 2026, brought to you on iRacing, Ryan Otis, your winner today. Now 3-time winner of the season, and indeed, not quite 3 in a row, but coming close to doing it, 2 in a row as of today. The priority there taking victory by 10.8 seconds ahead of Team Bear coach James Logsdon. Shajee Zuhair battled hard with Logsdon throughout the entirety of the race, and it was the battle between the two of them that allowed Otis to gradually pull away, but it was Logsdon who got the upper hand on Zuhair in the end by making a daring move on lap number 6 into Stowe Bend, and just held off Zuhair for the counter-attack into the Vale. But still, the arriving drive privateer never too far behind, 6 tenths of the separation, the battle of the Porsche and the BMW, and it was a further 50 seconds or so to Julian Jones, the privateer in his Ford GT, who had firm company in the form of Jermaine Warren, but after Warren's early spin, Jones was able to take the place off him and never look back. Glenn Bratton, your Pro-Am representative there today, taking the class win, but also taking that 5th place ahead of Jermaine Warren and the MOP racing driver after what was the difficulty earlier in the race, the unsafe pit entry, locking up into the pit lane. It gave him both a stop and hold penalty whilst his own pit stop served, and it also gave him a drive-through penalty, and the middle pack racing driver had to settle for 6th, but very quickly trying to chase down Glenn Bratton right at the finish, but ran out of time. But in terms of your prime finishing positions, because of course points are paid to the primes as well we only had one prime here today, Glenn Bratton, and he will take the winner's point as well as the 5th place overall point, and well done to Glenn there, representing the class proudly and bringing on home one of his strongest drives of the season. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our rundown of the results, subject to any insurers inquiries, but I do believe those have all been completed, and what it does mean is, good news is that we can bring you up to speed with the standings after round number 7, and how exactly the standings stand going into our season finale. And so, as we leave Silverstone behind, here's how the overall Drivers' Championship stands with 1 round to go. And as we can see, overall, in the Pro on the left-hand side, it's James Logsdon who leads by 21 points, and therefore he is the firm favourite ahead of Ryan Otis, who now matches Shajee Zuhair, but is ahead based on result count back 255 points apiece, but Ryan Otis has the 3 wins to Shajee Zuhair's 0. Taylor Buckout, meanwhile, sits in 4th ahead of Julian Jones, who's gradually closed on him, 18 points behind in the battle for 4th, and behind your top 5, it's Jermaine Warren, a further 13 points behind, with Matthew Morhart not on the grid today, but we hope to see him back in Belgium. He's on 174 points, 2 ahead of Chad Henson, and Matt Best there sits in 9th, and with him will be Eric the guy who completes the top 10, a further 2 points behind. Gabriel Ferreira, Blake Phillips, Jason Landry, Edwin Offrey, and Derek Day will complete your 15 drivers in the Pro class who score points this season. But of course, James Logsdon is the favourite to win the championship, but Ryan Otis will throw everything at it, and Shajee Zuhair will do the same in Belgium. Meanwhile, in the Prime class, we can see that with his win today, his first win of the season, Glenn Bratton moves into lead with a round to go ahead of Tom Bryce, but the gap between the two of them only a grand total of 2 points. Donald Sepek, who's not been seen for the last few rounds, where he sits in 3rd there ahead of Mark Senegal, and Roger Ganesh, Carl Peterson, and Bill DaCosta complete your prime 7 drivers. But what about in the Euro Cup? After 3 of 4 rounds in the Euro Cup, all of them count, of course. Well, Ryan Otis right now with a 17-point advantage. Surely, so long as he keeps it on the road next time out, he will be Euro Cup champion in the pros. James Logsdon sits in second. His rivalry with Shajee Zuhair continues to intensify. Only 5 points separate the two of them. Outside the top 3, it's Matthew Morhart on 89 points, 7 ahead of Julian Jones. Then we do Jermaine Warren a further 3 points behind. That's going to be exciting for 4th place at the very end of the season. And Taylor Book out there only a further point behind as well. Eric Lagai and Matt Best completing up the pros. And in the Prime class, being the sole representative of the class today, well, Glenn Bratton now takes a comfortable 37-point lead. And surely, even if Tom Bryce comes back, presuming that Bratton is on the grid, well, it's going to be Bratton's to lose next time out in Belgium. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to wait and see what happens in 2 weeks' time. But for now, at least, it is time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now wanting to know more about the Middle of the Pack Racing League community, now you can get on the grid for a future season of racing with us, because of course we do have plenty of racing, at least 2 seasons a year by my count. Well, the best place to go to is the official Middle of the Pack Racing League Discord, the MPRL Discord, invite link available on the screen, and you'll not find a more friendly and welcoming sim racing community, and we'd love to see you join, whether you're an esports professional all the way through to a rookie racer. There's a place for you on the grid with the MPRL. But if you want to follow us on social media, well, of course, you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/MOP Racing. Now you can stay up to date with all the latest news and announcements and all things Middle of the Pack racing, including the trials and tribulations of our official teams as they compete in iRacing official events. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we now look ahead to next time, and well, 1 round remains. It is, of course, the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, the venerable Belgian circuit in the Ardennes Forest, where we'll bring the curtain down what's been an absolutely brilliant season of Grand Touring endurance class racing. And whilst the racing will occur on Wednesday, the 3rd of June 2026, we invite you to come join us as if it were live to see how it all concludes on Saturday, the 13th of June. And going into our season finale and the overall Drivers' Championship is James Logsdon, who holds the cards. However, will we see Ryan Otis or Shajee Zuhair spring a final surprise on Logsdon at the end of the season? And in Pro-Am, 2 points separate Glenn Bratton and none other than Tom Bryce, but who will come out on top in the Prime class in a battle that's going down to the wire? Well, for all that and more, make sure you tune in next time to find out how the story concludes. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, we've been the Middle of the Pack Racing League. I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh. You've been tuned to a Paul Walsh production. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, as always, remember to stay on track. Good night.